Now you have to understand something about the summer of 1973 in North Georgia. The heat was a living thing. It sat on your chest before you got out of bed. It followed you to the car, climbed in with you, rode beside you with its arm out the window. By afternoon it had settled into the red clay earth and the pine trees and the surface of every still body of water in the county, and it wasn't going anywhere until October said otherwise. That kind of summer made young people reckless. Not stupid, exactly. None of them were fools. They'd all worked for what little they had, and each one of them understood, in that plain way people who grow up without much tend to understand, exactly what a thing was worth, and exactly how far they were willing to go to get it. What they lacked wasn't sense. It was the kind of caution that only comes later, after a person has already lost something they can't get back. Which is how 4 young adults ended up parked a quarter-mile from a house that did not belong to them, on a Friday evening in July, going over a plan one last time. The house was 3 stories of white columns and old money at the end of a magnolia-lined drive. The family, the Ashfords, had gone to Atlanta for the weekend. Everybody in the county knew it, which was exactly why Robert Callahan had chosen tonight. Robert, Bobby to the people who mattered, was 22, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of easy patience that made him look slower than he was. He'd spent 2 years on road crews and another year doing not much of anything, and he'd learned that most of the trouble people got into came from moving too fast. He didn't intend to make that mistake tonight. Beside him in the truck sat Michael Sutton, 21, wiry and quiet, a good deal sharper than he let on. Michael's uncle ran a small contracting outfit, and the 2 of them had spent the better part of a month that spring redoing the Ashfords' kitchen cabinetry and running new wiring through the west wing. Michael had been the one to notice the little steel door set into the back of the library closet, half hidden behind a row of hunting coats. He'd asked the housekeeper about it once, careless, curious. She'd told him more than she should have. Small safe, Michael said again now, mostly to himself. Library closet, behind the coats. Mrs. Ashford keeps the good pieces in there when they travel. I saw the necklace myself, laid out on velvet, the day they had it appraised. Man came out from Atlanta just to look at it. The sapphire, Debbie said. It wasn't a question. She'd heard the story 3 times already, and still leaned forward a little every time it came up, the way people do around money that isn't theirs yet. Deborah Marsh, Debbie to everyone, including her own mother, was 20, dark-haired, and possessed of a stillness that unsettled people who mistook it for shyness. She'd worked the register at a drugstore in town since she was 16, and had gotten very good, in that time, at reading which customers were about to make trouble before they knew it themselves. She had that same look on her face now, weighing the night ahead the way she'd weigh a man who couldn't quite meet her eyes. Vulgari, Michael said. Burmese sapphire, cut like a sugar loaf, rounded, not faceted. 52 carats and change. The appraiser said it was worth more than the house. Then let's not drop it, said the 4th voice from the truck bed, where Gary Nash sat with his boots hanging off the tailgate. Gary was 23, the oldest of them, and carried himself like a man who'd already learned the hard way that most plans went sideways somewhere in the middle. He wasn't book-smart. He'd say so himself, plainly, without any particular shame about it. But he had a steady set of hands and the good sense to keep his mouth shut at the right moments, which in Bobby's experience counted for more than cleverness most nights. We go in. We go to the closet. We don't touch anything else, Bobby said. In and out in 10 minutes. Michael gets the safe open. Debbie keeps watch from the hall. Gary and I carry. And then we drive it straight to Wallace, Michael said. Bobby nodded. Wallace Callahan was his cousin, older by 6 years, who'd been fencing goods out of a boat shed on the northern edge of Lake Lanier since before any of them had a driver's license. Wallace didn't ask questions and didn't linger, and he paid in cash the same night, which was worth something when a piece was this hot. The plan had always been simple. Take the necklace, get it across the lake to Wallace before sunup, let it disappear into whatever channel he used to move things like that out of Georgia entirely. "It's time," Bobby said, and started the truck rolling forward with the lights off. Michael found the kitchen window unlocked, same as always. The Ashfords trusted their remote drive and their tall hedges more than they trusted locks, which was a mistake rich people made more often than poor ones ever could afford to. He went in first and held it for the others. The house was dark and cool and smelled like lemon polish. They moved through it with the particular quiet of people who'd rehearsed this more than once, though never for a piece this size. The library closet was exactly where Michael said it would be, behind a row of wool hunting coats that still smelled faintly of gun oil. The safe was small, a household model, not built for a professional, which told Bobby everything he needed to know about how much the Ashfords trusted their own neighborhood. Michael worked the dial with the kind of patient, unhurried focus that came from having actually paid attention when his uncle talked about the mechanics of things. 2 minutes. 3. Debbie stood in the hallway with her back against the wall, watching the drive through a gap in the curtains, her breathing even and controlled. The safe clicked open. Inside, laid on a bed of dark velvet, was the necklace. Even in the dim light, it did something to the room. The stone sat heavy and round at the center of a setting of white gold and smaller diamonds, deep blue, shading almost to black at its heart, the kind of blue that seemed to hold more light than it gave back. 52 carats of Burmese sapphire, cut smooth and domed, like something poured rather than shaped, set by a house whose name alone was worth a small fortune before you ever got to the stone itself. Nobody said anything for a moment. It was the kind of quiet that comes over people in the presence of something genuinely valuable, something that makes the risk they're taking feel suddenly real, in a way it hadn't been in the truck. "That's it," Michael said quietly. "That's the whole night, right there." Gary lifted it out with both hands, careful as a man handling something alive. Bobby closed the safe, swung the coats back into place, and they were moving again, back through the kitchen window, back into the truck, the necklace wrapped in a dish towel and sitting in a small wooden box Debbie had brought along for exactly this purpose. 20 minutes later, they were on the road south toward the lake, windows down, the evening gold and wide open. Nobody talked much. There wasn't the giddy chatter of people who didn't know what they were carrying. There was only the low, watchful quiet of people who understood exactly what it meant and exactly what would happen to them if it went wrong. "We're set for a good while, if Wallace pays what he says he will," Gary said eventually. "He will," Bobby said. "He always has. Doesn't mean I like driving a $50,000 stone across a lake in the dark," Debbie said. Bobby glanced at her in the rear view. "Nobody said you had to like it, just had to do it." She didn't answer that, but she didn't argue it either. Lake Lanier sat about 20 miles south, wide and copper-colored, carved out of the Georgia hills when the government dammed the Chattahoochee in the 50s and flooded everything in the valley beneath it. Towns, farmland, churches, whole communities gone under the water in the name of progress. People had been drowning in that lake since before it finished filling. Nobody talked about that part much. Wallace's boat shed sat on the far northern shore, a good 40-minute run by water from where Bobby's uncle kept a speedboat docked on the eastern side. That was the arrangement. Cross the lake at night, meet Wallace at the shed, hand off the box, be home before the sun came up, and anyone thought to ask where 4 young people had spent their evening. When they pulled down to the eastern shore, Debbie got out of the truck and stopped. The water was too still for an evening with this much breeze. A dead tree stood at the water's edge, its bare branches reaching upward like an open hand with too many fingers. No crickets, no frogs, no birds settling into the pines. The sounds of a Georgia summer night simply weren't there, as though something had asked them to be quiet, and they had obliged. "I don't like this place," Debbie said. "Never have. My daddy used to say there's parts of this lake that never stopped being somebody's front yard." "It's a lake," Michael said, but there wasn't much conviction in it. "I know what it is," Debbie said. "I'm telling you how it feels." Nobody argued the point, because none of them could honestly say she was wrong. Bobby checked his watch. "Wallace is expecting us within the hour. We're not turning back over a feeling." He nodded toward the boat. "Gary, Michael, you're with me. Debbie, stay with the truck and the road. If anybody comes by, you're a girl waiting on her boyfriend, nothing more." Debbie didn't love it, but she understood the logic. 4 people crossing a lake at midnight drew less attention as 3. The 3 men climbed into the boat, Bobby at the wheel, Michael beside him with the wooden box held steady on his knees, Gary in the back, quiet now in a way that had nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with the water. The engine caught, and they were moving, water hissing along the hull, the shoreline falling away, the last of the sun painting everything gold behind them. Back on shore, Debbie sat on the tailgate and opened the box, just to look one more time. The sapphire looked different out here, darker, almost black, like something had gone out of it since they'd taken it from the safe. She turned it slightly in the moonlight and felt, without being able to say exactly why, that it was watching her back. She closed the box carefully and set it beside her. "You ever get the feeling some things don't want to be moved?" she said aloud, to nobody. Nobody answered. There was nobody left on shore to hear her. Out on the lake, Bobby saw the buoy too late. He turned the wheel hard to avoid it, too hard, and the boat swung wide and fast and found the tree. It had been down there for years, one of the old valley oaks, still rooted in the floor beneath 30 feet of water, its upper branches reaching toward the surface, a remnant of a town that had stood there before the dam went in. The boat hit it at speed. The sound that crossed the water was enormous and wrong. The hull split open, and the lake came in all at once. Michael screamed. The boat flipped. Then it was gone. Debbie heard it from the shore, faint and swallowed by distance, and was already running for the water before she'd finished understanding what she'd heard. The men went under without meaning to, without any chance to brace for the cold. And it was cold, far too cold for a July lake in Georgia, the kind of cold that hits a person like a decision someone else already made on their behalf. Gary came up sputtering, the wooden box gone somewhere beneath him, all the steadiness gone out of his face. For one moment he looked like exactly what he was, a man who'd made a living out of not panicking now. Then something below found his ankles, and his expression became something that had no name and no business being on a grown man's face. "Something's got me," he said, quietly, almost apologetically, as though reporting bad news he was embarrassed to deliver. He went straight down. No splash, no struggle. Gone. Michael surfaced, screaming, thrashing toward where he thought the shore was. "They're down there. There's people down there." He pointed below with a shaking hand, and then the water took him too. Smooth, fast, final. Bobby stopped swimming and looked down, and wished immediately that he hadn't. They were there, pale shapes drifting in the dark water below. Dozens of them, moving with the slow patience of things that had been waiting long enough that waiting had become their nature. Their limbs too long, their faces soft with years of cold water. Their eyes open, and white. A woman floated upward through the dark, her hair drifting around her like river weeds. She opened her mouth and black water poured out, and she smiled. Then Debbie, wading in up to her waist, screamed. A little girl hovered just below the surface in the dark water, perfectly still, her dress billowing gently, her white eyes fixed upward, with the calm patience of a child who has been waiting a long time for someone to finally arrive. One small hand reached up slowly. Then another hand appeared from the dark behind her, and another, and another. They took Debbie's ankles and held on. Bobby caught her hand and held it with everything he had left. For one moment he thought he had her. Then the pulling became a certainty, the way gravity is a certainty, and her hand slipped through his fingers. She was gone, pulled under without a ripple, as though the water had simply decided to keep her. The hands came for Bobby next. He fought, the way a man fights when he already knows how it ends, but his body hasn't accepted it yet. He kicked and reached for the surface and the last thin line of light above him. The lake swallowed him whole. The shoreline settled into silence. Night came down over the water, sudden and complete and indifferent, the way it does in that part of Georgia. People came searching later, Wallace among them. Once enough hours had passed without word that he drove around the lake himself, dread sitting cold in his stomach the whole way. Flashlights swept the shore. Voices called names into the dark and got nothing back. No boat, no wreckage, no sign that 4 young people had ever been there at all. Only a small wooden box, washed up dry on the sand, lid closed, exactly where the water had decided to leave it. Inside, a necklace, 52 carats of Burmese sapphire, set in white gold and diamonds, cut smooth as something poured rather than shaped. A stone that nobody who found it could quite bring themselves to touch. At dawn, a single small wave rolled up from a lake with no wind on it. The lid closed by itself, and the lake went still, as though nothing had happened at all, as though it had simply taken back what belonged to it, and was content. Real Scary Stories After Dark from Innovate Entertainment.